Welcome to the Storypowers Podcast, the show about the power of stories, the people who tell them, and why you should be doing it too. I'm your host, keynote speaker and storytelling coach, Francisco Mahfuz. My guest today is Yuri Kruman. Yuri is an award-winning interim CHRO, a top-rated executive coach, startup advisor, and official member of the Forbes Coaches Council. He's the author of What Millennials Really Want from Work and Life, and his new book, Be Your Own Commander-in-Chief, has been chosen by Forbes as one of the top 21 books to read in 2021. I once proposed to a girlfriend by telling her, I've got a passport, you need a passport, let's get married. But I think Yuri beats me hands down with this incredibly romantic proposal. We're both homeless, let's move in together and get married. Ladies and gentlemen, Yuri Kruman. Yuri, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Quite an introduction. That's it's a crazy story.
I make a point of always trying to find something weird for the introduction, and I didn't think I was going to beat the name of your first company, Juicy Juice, but I felt that the homeless marriage proposal was above there.
Hello, yes, I'm Russian immigrant. You are French immigrant. Let's get married. But first, begin.
I love the idea of you thinking that Juicy Juice, it was a great name for a company. As in, this was the name of the social media. Oh, yes, I'm into Juicy Juice. It's a great app.
My mother was horrified. She thought, this looks like some kind of terrible conspiracy out there. I'm like, just cute on T-shirts, Mom.
Yeah, Yuri, your people don't need any help. Cause you have problems enough as it is.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. You're right.
There's something else I found out. I didn't know this. Perhaps I'm just stupid, but I didn't realize that I was actually a millennial. But you and I are, I think, the same age. I'm almost 40. So are we millennials?
We're old millennials. I hate to tell you, Francisco. We're old. But yeah, we got that thing that says across the forehead, millennial, you suck, that's life.
Have you ever watched Scott Stratton's Millennial Rant?
I've heard of it. No, it's not on my playlist, but maybe it should be.
Well, so Scott Stratton is a very well-known keynote speaker, and he's the author of a whole bunch of books called Unmarketing is his brand. And there's this bit that he does in his keynote, and it's a rant, essentially. It's the millennial rant. And it changes all the time. And the last time I heard it, it involved him talking about how us, apparently. So us millennials, we're entitled because things are too easy. So he talks about how when we used to make mixtapes, you had to wait for the right song, and then you had to press play and record together. And the thing, sometimes the DJ would say something stupid, and even if you got it perfectly, it was just one song. You still had to get all the rest of them, and the bloody thing would stop working, and you needed a pencil to try and fix it. Whereas now, music is in your pocket. And he goes on to put a whole bunch of stuff, talk about a whole bunch of stuff about millennials. And then he puts his article on the screen, talking about how entitled they are and all of that. And people are like, yes, yes, yes. And then at the end of it, he reveals that this was an article from 1998 talking about Gen Z. And I think he says that he's developed that bit over the years, and he's gone and found a newspaper article from the late 1800s talking about what to end up being the Great Generation.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was my whole book. That was like, I'm sick of hearing this crap. I'm gonna basically look at the data, and yeah, the data is pretty much the same. All the same waves of nonsense. All the same old people being cranky about a younger generation that they're entitled and flaky and they've got it easy and we had it hard, and it's like it's just I hate to say it, it's kind of like a circle jerk.
So we can agree that those are very bad millennial stories. The story being told about our generation is not a very good one. What would be a better story?
What would be a better story? Well, read my novel. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, for me, I can tell you this: when I do coaching, when I do speaking, everything comes back to my own story. It's not because I have no other, reading or anything. It's just because I feel like, for whatever reason, God chose me to kind of be part of all these different things that are both typically millennial and also just timeless. And I think everyone has those elements in their story. It's just, selection bias. So if you tell a good story about millennials, I mean, you can't just say, hey, you grew up in the 90s and that was the golden age and all of that stuff. Obviously, we've been through two massive recessions. We've been through a lot of massive change. I think it's not even the change itself, it's the pace of change. It's the acceleration with which during our lifetimes, during even the last 20 years, I think I got my first cell phone. I'm not exactly a Luddite, but I was one of the last in among my friends to get it in 2003, 4, something like that.
Jesus, that took ages. I had a brick cell phone that weighed down my backpack when I think it was in the last year of school in the late 90s. I mean, you never used this thing; it was just to call your mom, but still.
Yeah, you're almost like the soldiers in World War II taking out stuff from the backpack, What I think, my philosophy in general is that, all the stories that people tell, they're not terribly unique. Everyone has stories of love and loss and immigration and war and famine. And there's nothing, light about those things. They're very heavy and they're very difficult. But there's nothing that prevents each new generation from saying, you know what, all we have to do is, even if we're monkeys on typewriters rewriting Shakespeare, we still have to retell those stories for a new generation with a new language and a new psychology. And that's a pretty fundamental part of what I think the meaning of life is. You have to transmit stories, whether, you see that as, I don't know, vectors, or you see that as helping raise your kids or what have you. But you have to transmit classic stories which are timeless. You can add cell phones in there, you can add, horses and buggies, but it's really the same thing. The fundamental part of it is the same. Again, all the same themes. I don't want to quote Woody Allen because he kind of like, I don't like this guy very much, and
he's not done a lot recently for your people.
No, he's not done much good for any people, apparently. No, but the point is that he always, love and death and Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Yeah, fine. Yeah, it doesn't have to be completely funny. It doesn't have to be completely serious. But there's something about telling whatever your story is. It doesn't matter how trite it is, or how typical or atypical it is. It has all the same components that someone else a generation before and all the way back has. So it's not in conflict in my eyes.
There's a few different, you wear many hats, and there's some that I'm particularly interested in talking about, because the focus of everything I do, and the focus of this podcast is stories and how they interact with different areas of life, but mostly business. And one of the areas that you've had quite a bit of experience with is startups. So there's a bunch of things that I know you have helped and do help startups with. And I just wanted to pick on some of those things and get your take of how much stories and being able to tell stories well have an impact there. And I think the very first one, and perhaps the most obvious one, is creating that pitch, typically to raise funds. So what sort of experience have you had with that, and how people use or don't use story particularly well to get that done?
So first of all, let me zoom out a little bit. I think for me, just as for you, stories are not just, let me think of the right story for this or for that. You have to have kind of a big story, a story bank. And from that story bank, you can take the same kinds of stories that connect what you're doing all the way to, I went through that. I had to solve that problem. I had no other choice. Now it's my life mission to help others, travel the same journey, find the same solution, what have you, but cheaper, better, faster, because it's business. So for me, it's the same idea whether somebody goes and they want to interview and get into a job, because that's also running some part of someone's business, right? So if you want to be successful in using your story to get a job, to get funding, to build something, to convince others to come work with you or invest with you, you have to, before you go and kind of become very clever and use different language and psychology and keywords and all of that kind of stuff. You have to have some kind of genuine connection in what you're doing to what you've been through, because otherwise it's just a cool startup bro, right? And people smell right through that and they see right through that, and it fails miserably. So one thing is, if some people get away with this, let's say they go to Stanford and they're building the next Instagram, they have that massive network of people, maybe they're already connected through their parents or what have you, dumb money, right? So you have dumb ideas, some kind of new video app that there's a million out there, something that's been done 1,000 times. It gets dumb money. It can go pretty far that way, but all but 0.1% of startups don't come out of that. So people have to genuinely connect to their story. When they go on stage, they speak to an investor, they have to say, look, when I was a kid, I had health issues, and because of that, like I'll take a step back. So I have a client now. I'm coaching him to get into corporations. He was a teacher for a long time, and he battled Tourette's as a kid. Imagine that, how brutal that is, right? As a kid, you have Tourette's and you have to deal with all this. So he's a learning and development guy. So I helped him formulate a story. Like he gets really, really far. He got into the final rounds of interviews with Facebook. Like something didn't click. So he keeps hearing this feedback. Wow, you're so awesome, but like you're different. So I'm like, okay, well, you're Wolverine, No, but his superpower is that, yeah, he overcame Tourette's, and like nobody knows that he had Tourette's because he's so good at covering it up. But I told him, don't cover it up. That's a fundamental part of your story. You went through that. You suffered. You went through absolute hell. Tell people that, because people know, people sense things. They may not know how to verbalize it. Like, you're different, but like, well, you're different from our typical corporate profile. So it's the same idea. You identify objections in your pitch, right? Because you know that those people are thinking, hey, well, there's a million other video apps. Like, say I had Tourette's, or instead of people thinking, well, I don't know, something's off, like something's not quite right. They're like, holy shit, this guy overcame Tourette's. Like, imagine what he can do for learning and development. He's been doing that his whole life. So on the turn of a dime, a detail like that connects your story to what you overcame and how you see the world unlocks a tremendous amount of energy and connection. And people say, that's what you want when you tell your story, whether you're courting your future wife or you're courting an investor or you're trying to get a job. It's really fundamentally the same thing. When you make that connection for yourself, like, okay, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to build this thing because I did elements of that as a kid and I had to help my mom with it. And, I helped my friends in college, like, okay. So you really have been building this thing your whole life, whether that's Juicy Juice or something else.
Well, I guess that in the Tourette's example, and again, maybe this is for a corporate job, is perhaps would feel less suitable than if it was a startup. I mean, if it's a startup and you are doing anything to do with development and language, then it would be the craziest thing in the world to try and hide the Tourette's. For a corporate interview, I can kind of see how someone would think, okay, well, how is this necessarily a great advantage? But obviously it is, because it shows that you have struggled against something that is a lot harder than most people struggle with. And hiding that is this idea that there is such a thing as normal, and normal is good. Or actually normal, if you pull it off perfectly, you might have just talked yourself out of a job because now you blend in. You're less memorable as just a normal guy instead of the guy with Tourette's but did he swear all the time? No, he didn't actually. He didn't swear a whole time once through the whole interview because he says he's worked on it and has gotten over it. That will stick with that interviewer. If nothing else, that guy will get talked about when they're discussing who to hire. Might not get hired, but still, I mean, it'd be crazy to hide that.
I think it's a very important point you bring up. When you're doing your pitch, you're doing your interviewing, you're doing your whatever, okay? When you're telling your story, you're not doing it because you have to please everyone. You're not going to. We know that, right? Whether that's in a corporate job, yeah, you're not going to please everyone. There will be people that say, well, I don't know. And for maybe legal reasons, they might kind of, say something else, that something else is off. But the point is, when you're fully aligned with who you are, you're comfortable with who you are and where you come from and what you look like and what you're trying to do in life, then it doesn't matter, because you actually attract the right people by being fully yourself, and the rest fall off. So if you don't get the job, I mean, it may look terrible now, but you're probably avoiding a giant pile of steaming, you know what, and that's good. That's a good thing, right? So same idea with investors. If those investors, if all they want to hear is, oh, it's a new video app and let me throw my dumb money at it, you probably don't want that either, because that's going to harm you later on. They're not going to help you grow. They're not going to help you with their networks. They're just going to help you with their dumb money that doesn't take you far. So anyway, you have to have that longer term view and still say, yeah, it might cost me in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to be much better. Telling my story the way I see fit with all those steps of alignment. So that, I learned this the hard way. I'm in my 6th career, right? So in most of the other ones, for me, language and psychology, that's my thing. I'm an immigrant. I'm pretty good at languages, and I'm pretty quick at understanding who needs to hear what, right? But when you're not sure of yourself, when you're young, you're seeking, who am I, what am I, where am I going, who am I helping? You're kind of like, you start to grab for things that you shouldn't grab for, because it's just not who you are. Like how I ended up in a finance and operations role as an associate director. It's insanity, right? I'm talking to the guy for 18 months. Love your company. Okay, we see eye to eye. One day he's like, come for lunch. Okay, I come for lunch. He's like, look, I need someone to do finance and operations. I have a director, but he's like, should have been a red flag for me that he's saying bad stuff about his employee. I need someone to come and replace him. I'm like, well, I've never done finance and operations. No, I get it. But, I know you're a quick learner and I really like how you see the world. Okay. So I was in the company by next Monday. I was at their offsite the next morning, and, it seemed like a great idea. And I talked my way into it because I was speaking with them all those other times. What did I step into? Why did I step into this giant pile of steaming excrement? Because I'm always looking higher. I've got to reach higher because, I have to make this much money. Yeah, I mean, I have to support my family and pay off my loans. It's not trivial stuff. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, adventure. And it's not like this is who I am or this is what I'm aligned to. There are elements. But at that point, I'm not strong enough to recognize why I should say no, why this is a bad idea.
Yeah, sometimes we can talk ourselves into things. I remember my very first job was in local government back in Brazil. And I don't remember what the job was meant to be for, but at some point at the interview or just when I started, someone asked me if I knew anything about websites. And you do this thing where you just kind of like, yes. And it says, great, because we need to, sort of give a fresh look to the whole website of this part of this department of the local government. I had barely been online by then. So I had no idea what I was doing. And then they basically sent someone in to teach me, I don't know, HTML. And it's me, like I'd never done this before. And I'm spending hours on HTML. I was like, oh yeah, this would look a bit better if I put another line here. And there was just no way I had the capacity to do that job. But it was so embarrassing to say to them, listen, I actually lied. I don't know how to do this. Is there anything else you can give me? And eventually they figured it out and they gave me something else to do. But I think it's something that a lot of people do, and perhaps not in such an obviously stupid way, but an opportunity presents itself, you pursue it, something feels off while you're going through it, but perhaps you don't have it very clear yourself, what you're about, what's your purpose, what are the things that inspire you, and you talk yourself into a job and sometimes spend years hating it. And I think that's a problem that perhaps happens a little less now than it used to happen when people stayed in a job forever, but I'm sure it still happens plenty.
You're actually bringing up another idea about millennials, which I think it's a pretty central theme. So for us, because we're kind of like we're going up a mountain with time and everything is getting better and opportunity is more plentiful. And, all of you should be, Nobel Prize winners and play at Carnegie Hall. Not quite, right? But especially when, you come from let's say, immigrants and all of that stuff. Like it's just things are ratcheted up. Like you can't sit and twiddle your thumbs. You have to go and be the best of whatever. So whether you're an immigrant or just, Joe Schmo and whatever, the expectations for millennials are huge. At this stage, we're all kind of like family people, whatever. Things are a little bit off that curve, but same idea, right? You have to go and you have to know who you are. You have to know what you want from life, and rah rah rah. You should read 10,000 self-help books and listen to 10,000 graduation speeches from Steve Jobs, right? And everything will be well. No, life is, I think, fundamentally meant to go through struggle. If you're going to get anywhere, you have to take a lot of wrong turns. You have to tell a lot of the wrong stories in your head and go through a lot of upheaval and change if you're going to amount to anything. Quite frankly. So I think the disconnect between what we were taught, how life works, everything should be lined up. You should have, savings of X at this age. You should make this much at that age. You should have a 2.1 car garage at 35. All of those idiotic kind of pictures. Like, why do I need to attach myself to that? If I let's say, okay, sake of argument, let's say at 17, I would have stayed in Kentucky. Okay. I would have gone to college, done really well. I would have been probably, top student in the class, gone to law school, probably done pretty well there. I'd be doing really well for Kentucky standards. And it's nothing against Kentucky. I love the place. I grew up there, but it's just a very different atmosphere, right? It's not this crazy competition. To have that, 4-bedroom house with a 2-car garage, 3 kids, whatever, relatively easy. You don't need a lot. You don't need that crazy debt because college and grad school are cheaper there. So, okay, that's a hypothetical. It doesn't do much for me now because I live in Brooklyn and the standards are very different. But the point is, you choose your journey, right? So if I would have just said, okay, well, that's where I top out, okay, fine. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's neutral. But for whatever reason, having been raised on novels and fine literature and all of that, Don Quixote, here he comes, So I had to go to New York.
He was insane,
He was insane. I know. Trust me. Well, okay, but that's you grow up with these ideas.
Well, hold on. You're Russian. Shouldn't you have grown up with significantly more miserable ideas than all the aspirational Don Quixote stuff?
Russians don't go looking for misery; it finds them on its own. But we left for that reason. Nobody wants that for their kids. But yeah, that's a big thing, right? The narratives that you grow up with, whether you read Don Quixote or Saul Bellow or Shakespeare, all these things stay with you as a kid, especially when you're very impressionable and all you know is change because you move and your parents get divorced and like you're changing careers, you're dating people from funny parts of the world that you've never visited. You become very impressionable, and that means your development into your full self, meaning like, okay, I have barriers and I know now who I am and what I'm meant to do and how to do it. That takes time. And that's fine. That's normal. All the mistakes are not unnatural. They're not, but most people don't have the appetite to keep making mistakes with aplomb, like the Churchill quote.
I think you have repeatedly said that you've made many mistakes with aplomb. It's something I found very interesting for someone who does talk about stories, because what a lot of people do, and I understand that this is part as well when people do change careers, there is an element of, okay, what are the common threads of what I've always done that I can maybe sell as my strengths? So, and sometimes this is the most natural thing to do. I now do a lot of speaking, and if I think back, it's not particularly hard to remember that I was the kid that stood up in front of class to present, and then I was a teacher. I taught English to teenagers, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And every single job I ever had, I was usually the one who did the training for the big accounts. So there is a theme there. I'm not making anything up when I say that I've spoke or presented for most of my career. But a lot of people just try to tweak those and make everything sound like it was building up to this great climax. But I've not heard you do that at all. You've when you describe your life story, it's I tried this and that failed. Then I tried this other thing and I didn't have the chops for that. And I did this other thing and I don't know why I did that job because I had no interest in finance or whatever. And then you go into coaching, and that's when at that part you do say how this was something that was natural to you, that type of approach. But my question there, both for yourself and how you coach other people to do that when they're going through interviews or whatever they're doing, is do you feel that the journey needs to start all the way back and get you to where you are now so you can pass whatever you're trying to do now as a strength? Should that not be the case, or is a very much case by case basis for each individual person?
I would say like this. My view, again, you have to start with big picture philosophy, right? So for me, because I know the power of story for myself, and I've had to repeatedly, first it was adjusting. It's like, well, audience, adjust. Oh, wow, it's so good, I get in there. But again, when you don't do the hard work of anchoring that to the ground and to your beginnings and to your roots also, something will do that for you, because someone will say, oh, well, you're really this. And they go, oh, right. So in order to avoid that, do it yourself. Ground yourself, figure out how this relates to who you are, where you come from, your traditions, your ways of seeing the world. Do that for yourself. Yeah, it's hard work. It's a lifelong process probably. But when you do that, nobody can kind of come and knock you off and say, oh, you're a fraud. There are plenty of people out there. They'll come and they'll just, place like New York, they'll tell you to your face, you're a fraud. You're full of shit. What? Right? So instead of doing that, just be consistent throughout and stick with your story. Because when you stick with your story, again, the right people will be attracted to you, whether that's employers, that's advisors, investors, what have you. And that's what you want. That's the way things work when they work. And when they don't work, it's because you're half-assing the process. You're not being thorough. You're not being comprehensive or very frankly honest with yourself. You don't have integrity internally, and that doesn't work. So when you, whether it's for myself, and I try to do this with humor. It's not like, oh, I failed and I'm a no, like I don't really consider it failure.
It's not a Russian approach, you mean? Yeah.
No, it's adventure.
You're not torturing yourself for 700 pages over one thing.
God knows I did enough of that. I have way too much of that crap in my background and in my probably genetics and epigenetics. I'm done. I'm good. It's not like I don't examine things deeply, but I turn everything inside out. And I say, yeah, okay, there's some nasty parts here. There's some good parts here. I'll take the good. I'll remember the bad. I'll, make sure the thread runs through that so that I can, usually it's to teach others. It's not even for myself anymore. Like essentially, I see my path through 6 careers, immigration, parents being divorced, moving 20 plus times. All of that had to happen for some reason. Again, I can only think backwards and try to understand. I mean, that's where the faith component comes in, right? You believe that, okay, God sent me here at a certain time, in a certain place, with certain people, with certain capacities to go through this process and these experiences in order to derive some kind of learning, some kind of understanding, distill that, whether that's through writing, whether that's through coaching, speaking, what have you, in order to help people better their lives. So it's kind of like I've been through a certain journey, and the journey is always ongoing. And it's not like, oh, I reached the top of the mountain, I'm a guru. No, you go up and down the mountain every single day, and you notice new things and you learn new skills, but you know why, you know where you're headed and what it's for. Now you learn the path, you bring up others with you up the same mountain, and you help them with the same process. So it's kind of like, sounds a little bit like a pyramid scheme in all senses, but it's a good one, because that's what are we doing in this life? That's what we're doing. We're going up and down that mountain, and we're bringing up others with us. And if we don't bring them with us, then we're probably not really fulfilling our potential.
Well, the pyramid scheme that you describe sounds perhaps a little more optimistic than the Sisyphean struggle that a lot of people believe life to be, where we just pushing that rock up a hill, and the rock comes down, we come back down and push it up again. I think that I agree with most of what you said. I think that our brain is looking for patterns, and it's one of the most natural things in the world to say, well, if that hadn't happened, this couldn't happen. Now, sometimes that's obviously going to be true. Sometimes I think it will be random, but we find it very difficult to integrate random events. And not only it's difficult, but regardless of them being random or not being random, it's just so hard to have that piece not fitting any narrative. And I'm going through this now in a fairly painful way, where I'm going through a tax audit, and the Spanish tax authorities don't like some of the absolutely legal documentation that I provided them to show some rental income. And I'm at the moment I haven't won they want my money, and they're probably going to get it before I can get it back. And it's driving me mad because I cannot fit that into a satisfying narrative. It's not, but I cut some corners, so now, it's karma. It's just, well, no, someone is just woke up on a bad day and they're giving me a hard time. I can't learn anything from it. And it's driving me crazy that I can't find an angle that allows me to say, okay, fine, I can see how that happens, and this is the lesson from it. It's just like, ugh.
Zealous auditor.
Yes, how do I build this into my life so that I'm stronger for it? I'm not. I often say this, that all great stories are a journey from pain to power. You need to be able to do more or know more at the end of it than you were at the beginning. I'm just getting the pain. I'm looking for that power, and I'm not finding it anywhere.
Maybe they'll find some tax loophole for you. I don't know. You never know.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff you're describing, is that what you normally refer to as founding stories?
Yeah. So founding stories, I'm glad you brought that up. So for me, actually, if I really tell you very frankly why I do coaching, that's why. That's the one piece. Because ever since I'm a kid, I'm a writer, and I'm reading God knows how many books from all kinds of different traditions. So what am I doing since I'm a kid? I'm trying to understand my narrative arc as compared to, I don't know, Augie March or Don Quixote or whoever, a whole bunch of different characters. And I'm trying to pick up, it's almost, as funny as it sounds, it's almost mathematical. I'm trying to figure out the tangent across that curve, and to see how does that inform my path? Should I expect this? So it's a lot of chewing on the same thing, trying to get out more nutrients, same kinds of stories, but that's my process. That's my founding story, right? So for me, when I coach people, I look at, so I'll give you an example. There's a guy, one of my first clients in coaching. On paper, he looks like, okay, he's a jock. He's from Upper West Side in Manhattan. He went to Vanderbilt. Looks like just a regular white dude. Okay, so he works in an investment bank, Credit Suisse. Oh, great, awesome. So this is easy, right? So I meet up with him in a co-working space, and we sit down, and for about 90 minutes, I'm methodically, because I think like Sherlock Holmes, because that's again part of my arsenal. I'm looking for all of these different angles. Like what can there be? What can I hang a hat on? And soon enough, I asked the right question. He's like, I don't know if I mentioned my mom is black. Your mom is black? Like, well, growing up on Upper West Side, your dad is Jewish, your mom is black. Whoa, that's kind of a big deal. He's like, yeah, oh, there's another thing I forgot to mention. When I was born, I could only eat 3 foods. What? He's like, yeah, I was in the hospital for like 9 months because, they had trouble feeding me. I think we got our founding stories. Ding, ding, ding. Right. So this guy, he, again, on paper, everything looks like, pretty bland, pretty pale.
So definition of white privilege.
Pretty much, right? Yeah. And I mean, whatever. His dad works in like one of the top entertainment firms as a lawyer. So it's not a question of whether there is privilege or not. It's like what goes on in this person's head, right? And when I kind of poked in the right place, and this is kind of like that $10,000 mechanic on a ship, right? That kind of scenario. When you know what questions to ask, stories will flow because you'll know sort of what you need out of that person, regardless of privilege, not privilege. Someone's really entitled, really flaky, millennial, or whatever. When you get that out of them, you see the inner struggle. When you see the inner struggle, you can map that inner struggle to a story arc. You can help them to understand themselves better because they themselves probably, have that cloud of like, oh, I'm privileged. And like, okay, I don't really care. I'm not here to examine. I'm not auditing your privilege. I'm just here to help you figure out who the hell you really are and what to do with it, career-wise or business-wise, right? So when you get that out, you make people feel human. Like there's something, there is something maybe special, not in the particular story of this, like health issue as a kid, grew up poor, was an immigrant. None of that is original in its own right. However, the combination of stories and the particular involutions of that story curve, they are unique. And yes, you can go back and maybe map your journey to, I don't know, Stefan Zweig and his escape from Europe. And I don't care, right? Every generation needs a retelling of the same kinds of stories. So don't try to say, I need to make it to that Nobel Prize or Carnegie Hall, or I'm absolute nothing. No, start from scratch. What have I been through? What does that do for me? What is my direction from that? That's what matters. Whatever your starting point, doesn't matter. What have you done to map your journey since then?
I know that Juicy Juice wasn't at the end a brilliant idea necessarily, but the privilege auditor, I think that one has legs. Maybe that's your next startup. Audit the privilege, produce a certificate with a score, and you can see
and nail it to your forehead.
Social justice warriors will be killing themselves over getting those certificates. That's the one.
Not bad. That's not a bad one, but I think you should run with it since you're good at websites.
Since there's a problem, perhaps for the both of us, we have too much privilege to run with this. We need someone with less privilege than we do. You mentioned that if you know the right questions to ask, then the story flows. Do you have any favorite questions to ask that you find get you do a lot of heavy lifting?
What's your shoe size? No, I'm kidding. There are certain things. I usually probe for any traumatic events. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trying to do therapy, but by definition, my work involves pulling out that kind of trauma because it informs the rest of life. So some people have, again, health issues as kids, and they have to live in a bubble, real bubble or otherwise. Financial issues, because we know what a massive stressor that is when you always have to think about money, especially as a kid. It really it makes you squirm, and maybe it makes you more resourceful, but it also kind of maybe kind of like you get it, you spend it. That's kind of the message that you see, perhaps, or perhaps it's the opposite. It's all about risk management, and your savings rate has to be 60%. So those kinds of things inform worldview. They become lenses for how I see the world. So if I'm an immigrant again, right? So I moved from Moscow to Kentucky. What?
I mean, a time-worn tradition, Moscow to Kentucky.
Yes, indeed. So my lenses, again, I have to blend in. Yeah, I'm Jewish, so that's kind of like, it's a little bit of a trump card if you have it. But essentially, I have to blend in. I have to speak the language. I have to make myself understood. And I'm not looking to be popular. I'm more of an introvert, if anything, believe it or not. But I have to just make sure that things are stable. Like, nobody's looking at me funny. Nobody's bullying me. Like, just stay hidden in plain sight. And what I found is the vast majority of people, and again, I don't think it's a millennial thing. I think it's just generally a human nature thing. Most people find that comfort zone where they're hidden in plain sight. And when they get to a point in life where their golden handcuffs no longer do it for them. They feel something waking up, or something is bothering them, or it's spilling over into their family life or whatever. They usually seek out help. They seek out a coach, a therapist, what have you. They might, watch Steve Jobs' graduation speech. Right? But something is calling out from inside of them. I'm tired of hiding in plain sight. I'm tired of that. I want to try something new. I want to feel fully myself. I don't like my battery, I forgot, the guy, he's an Israeli Arab, went to Harvard. He does this show, was doing for you, Nas Daily, right? So he had this T-shirt, 34%, like he's 34 years old. And like most people walk around with that, not because of their age, like their battery is just not full. And they don't know why until it hits them. Like, I'm not living my full life. I'm not fully myself. I'm just kind of mediocre, hanging out, hiding in plain sight. So when that happens, the story is what brings it out, because patterns can be bad and patterns can be good. The biggest part of my book, the biggest chapter of this Be Your Own Commander in Chief, is about biases and notions, because that's the pattern detector up here going bonkers. Selection bias, you have confirmation bias. You have literally 100 and I don't know how many, almost 200 different biases. Right? So you have to account for that. First, you have to be aware of them, because most people don't even understand what is Dunning-Kruger or any of this stuff. So be aware of it. Understand that your brain seeks patterns even when they don't exist, and then reverse engineer those patterns and say, okay, that has flaws. Right? So when you unlock all of those different biases and notions about yourself, never mind about the outer world and your privilege and all that, you start seeing like, okay, it's more complex. There's more soft tissue, but wow, is it super interesting. I forgot to have this whole house with 100 rooms in there. I'm just hanging out in one room, worried, sick about, not seeing the view. I've just got to clean. I got to clean the view. I got to go to other rooms and remember who I am. That's what coaching is.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the part you talk about where you're describing people walking around with a Heffa battery, it's something that you can try and explain to people if they're doing work that they're not passionate about, and this word that people love throwing around with purpose. If they're doing work that they don't feel is meaningful, then they just don't get how much of a difference that makes. It's a bit similar to when you try to explain to people what having children is like. And they can get some of the idea, but you can say whatever you want to someone about how you feel about a child, but if they haven't felt that, there's just no explaining it, or they will understand the concept as, oh yeah, no, I've had a dog before, fine, and that's you got the category right, but you can't grasp the intensity of what we're talking about. And I think it's with a lot of people, that idea of hiding plain sight, which I like a lot, is something they know that something is missing, but they don't necessarily know what finding it does for them. They're trying to fill a hole, but it's not just a negative thing. I think you might feel no particular gap in your life and not realize that if you were doing something that meant more to you, it will become a plus. It's not just it's not something that just cures a problem. It's something that actually improves every aspect of your life, when you find that mission.
You just made me think of something. Actually, two things. One is, in Kentucky, they tried to give us a taste of what child rearing is like by giving us those electronic babies, and you have to put the key in the mouth, like 2 a.m. It didn't work. It did not work. Here we are 3 kids later. The other thing I wanted to mention, I think this is a very interesting idea. So if you take a mathematical analysis of what a person might feel, what I think all of us feel in a way, because things are so fast moving, there's business, there's personal. Maybe the most difficult thing in life to achieve is when, think of a map. You have a GPS, Google Maps. You have two things happening. Number one is you have your path plotted. I'm going from point A to point B. So all of us, almost by default, we're always thinking about B. Okay. I mean, maybe about A because I'm starting there, but almost nobody really cares about where am I now and why is this the right place for me to be? And yeah, there are many detours or many options to get to point B, but what if I just focus on that point, that little arrow where I actually am now, and what can happen from there? Just being happy with being in that place where I am now, in time, in space, with the people I'm with. What if that's the real key to life? It doesn't mean that you're not aware of your destination or where you came from. It just means that you're focused on, okay, here I am. And in this moment of time, I can notice 1,000 things. I'm driving through Manhattan, let's say, right? I notice 1,000 things. I notice 1,000 memories. I can help people when I'm in this place while I'm on the journey by perhaps giving them guidance or coaching them or, just giving them a smile. What if that's the real key to life as opposed to point B and then point C and D and da. Or, where I came from, it's all about point A. No, it's just like you're there, you're flashing on the screen, you're moving. Maybe sometimes you're moving faster, traffic is faster, sometimes you're slower because you're stuck. But you're focused on that point, and you're not focused on, oh crap, I have to make 6 figures by 30. Oh crap, I have to have 2 million in savings by 50. It's not really interesting because you don't really know what lies in your path. I mean, hell, there could be a detour, there could be an accident. I mean, you don't bloody know. Maybe there's a bus that's gonna come and cut you off. Nobody knows. So maybe the key to life is you're that little arrow and you're flashing and you're going across the screen and you're just doing your best in that moment, in that place with those people to give value, to help them through your channel. Maybe, I mean, that's what I found. That's my little conclusion from my little journey and what have you. If you set up your life through a lot of hard work, and there are 4 pieces, a conversation with your body, that's the foundation. So nutrition, fitness, breathing, sleep, etc. Number 2 is mental models. So you address your biases and notions. You learn how to make decisions well from a core place, how to manage expectations, manage stress. You learn how to manage your finances, career, and business. You learn how to deal with other people, the 3rd level, going up that mountain, where, okay, how do you deal with advisors, investors, employees, bosses? How do you make sure that you're with the right people? You cut away all the wrong ones, and then you're 300% present. You're that blinker on the map with those people in that time, in that space. You're giving value. You're making lives better, right? Through your startup, through your job, your book, whatever. You're that flashing thing, and people are drawn to that. Oh, wow. Like, what is that? And they want to go on the journey with you. And then up top, okay, what about the big picture? What about God and the universe? What does that conversation look like? Is that meditation? Is that rituals? Is that prayer? What is that, right? How do I balance feeling like a complete nothing in the grand scheme of the universe and the most important thing without which the universe would not work had I not arrived at the exact time when I was born and been through whatever I've been through, right? So again, maybe that's the key piece. You work on those 4 pieces and you go up and down the mountain, you bring people with you, and you more or less focus on that blinker. You're in that time, you're in that space. What can I do? How can I be better at serving other people? And perhaps, if you're so inclined, if that's your religious tradition, how can I make a place for God in this material place? How can I bring godliness here? How can I help others to find the way? Not by telling them what to think, but teaching them how to think.
I am not a particularly religious person. I'm very much into meditation, and I have a lot of sympathy for the philosophical and psychological aspects of things like Buddhism. But there's one thing about most religions, but particularly the Abrahamic religions, that I would 100% be delighted if it became more the norm, which is that their teachings are based on stories. Of all the things that people get from religion, this is one that is staring them in the face, and you still have to convince people these days that it's a a valuable form of communication and sometimes the best form of communication, depending on what you're trying to do. And they will argue against that and then go back to their Bible.
Thank you. Thank you very much for saying that, because that's exactly what I think. It's like it's a massive resource and you're just like completely ignoring it.
I think maybe the pitch, particularly in my case, because the story part is my focus. I should ring up companies that I know profess to be say Christian, or which would be very common in the US, and say, listen, it was good enough for Jesus. You're saying it's not good enough for you and your company.
Nice.
Maybe that is the pitch. Listen, one thing. It's not a particularly serious question, but I know that your company or one of your companies is called Master the Talk, right? And I remember that I heard that, and I know that you have 2 girls, right?
2 girls and a boy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think what I heard, it might have been an earlier podcast where you just had the 2 girls, and I think they're similar ages to mine. Mine are 4 and 1, and yours are a bit older than that.
Yeah, 7 and 4.
And I heard the name Master the Talk, and I thought, geez, not too long from now, I'm going to have the talk with my girls. I mean, I must master that talk, because that one can go horribly wrong.
Talk to your mother. She's French.
Yes, I had the feeling that that's one of the talks you don't want to have to master.
At a certain point, you get disabused of pretty much all the notions. My wife, God bless her, she's an engineer. She has zero filter. So one great thing about that is in the first few years, you're just like there's like a nuclear explosion in your face. And the second one, it doesn't have as much impact. Eventually, you're like, okay, well, what if I do that nuclear explosion? Like, what happens? And then eventually, you have zero filter, and you just have the conversations, and you just like approach it as a rational person. You have all the layers. There's the religious, the secular, the common sense, the something else, and like, okay, kids, listen. We trust you. Here's what I know. I don't know everything. I've got flaws. That's how I talk to my kids. I'm like, look, I don't want you to think that I'm some kind of guru. I'm not. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm pretty open about it. And I'm not gonna tell you that this is God's truth. I mean, as far as I know, this is what I've read. Here are the citations. Here's what I know from my story. Like, I want you to learn to make decisions and have understandings for yourself. Again, I'm trying to teach them not what to think, but how to think.
I don't think we're under any risk of our children thinking of us as gurus, Yuri. I think that anything, we should go heavy on that to maybe see if the inertia takes us up to the beginning of the teenage years. Because I think as things are going, by the time they're like 10 or 11, we're already off the pedestal. And most of the stuff we'll say, they go, that's not true. I just Googled that. That's not actually true, Dad.
But I wrote a book.
So this is when you understand why people weren't in favor of everyone learning how to read, because there's just too many sources to disprove whatever you were trying to tell your children. Right. Your latest book is Be Your Own Commander-in-Chief. When is that out?
On March 2nd in ebook form. And hardcover will be out in April.
Okay, perfect. And if I know you're in a few different places online, but if people want to find you, what's the best place to look for you?
Just yurikruman.com.
I'll stick that in the show notes. Yuri, it's been a great pleasure.
It's been a great pleasure, Francisco. I don't have too many conversations that go like this and end up right here. Thank you.
It's always my goal to have a different conversation. I know you've been to a ton of podcasts. I think that life has enough struggle to make you repeat the same interview over and over. So if we manage to touch on different parts of your expertise and your opinions, that's what I was going for.
Thank you. Really, really well done.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, and until next time. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, I'd love for you to subscribe and leave us a review or a rating on the Apple Podcasts app. It's very easy. You open the app and find this show. Then scroll down a little, and when you see the stars, tap. I'd really appreciate it, and it does help other people find us. And if you'd like to get in touch or find out more about what I do, reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit my website, storypowers.com.